Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of Reimagine Productivity. This is one program I so love doing so much because it brings us to that moment in time where we start to think about productivity. We start to look at how productive we are and how we can enhance our productivity in what we do in all the different areas of life. We start to look at productivity from different perspectives. We started out looking at productivity a few weeks back. We looked at it in the property sector. Then we had an amazing time last week with Clara Rufai as we talked about different strategies that you could employ to identify your talents, your gifts, the ones that you should harness. This week, though, I am super excited because we've got with us a change and business transformation consultant. Wow. Now, we're going to be looking at this. Listen, we're almost at the end of February, and so many people had goals, they had dreams, things they wanted to do. Well, 2 out of 12 is almost gone. So, without wasting much time, I'm going to bring on our guest. Like I said, she's a change and business transformation consultant. Oyindamola Sosanya is no stranger at all to this topic. In fact, just before we went live, we were talking about change, and I think we might probably just start the program off on that. So, Oyindamola, you are welcome to the program this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. As I always say, it's one of my productivity, change, transformation. I love talking about it. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Just before we came online, we were chatting about what happened just before coming on, and I found it quite interesting because usually when this kind of things happen, you're talking about change, then you get presented with an issue on on change that you really need to deal with. And I'm going to throw a question at you, but let me
Okay.
give the users a little bit of context. So I'm going to put you in the deep end here. So
Oh
see,
God, I hope I can swim.
I'm sure you will swim on this one. Anyway, so just before we went live, there is a standard equipment that we use and all of that.
Mm,
And then 20 minutes before going live, just checked it. The cable was plugged in, it was supposed to be
mm.
charging. And we just realized, oh my goodness, this is not charging. And I was saying, what's happened? We put it on, it was on zero, just flashing. I was like, oh goodness me,
Wow.
what do we do here? Oh, we're going to start the program in 20 minutes. And I started saying to myself, no, don't be stressed. Don't be stressed. I refuse to be stressed under this circumstance. And that's what the question I want to throw at you. There are many people out there who are going through, going through different things. They've put plans together and suddenly life throws life at them. Like people say,
Mm,
life happens.
mm.
As a change consultant, how do you handle that sort of scenario?
So I'm going to try and break that into two scenarios. So when you say change as a change and a business transformation consultant, there's change that you plan for. So there is the change that you say, okay, we want to embark on this transformation. We want to change from what we were into this new thing. And so you have a time of planning. You try to think of things that you can do, but then you have change that happens to you, like you said, that life throws at you without you, even thinking about it. We always say life is what happens when you have a plan, and that is the more difficult one. And there's a saying that someone that I don't know who said it. I've forgotten who said it. That said, you can't help change, as in change is inevitable, but progress is optional. So when you get, as you said, we in the last year or so, we have gone through a period of change so unprecedented that as in, I don't think if anybody in January this time, even in February 2021, 2020 rather, I don't think anybody would have thought that we would be in this situation. So the worst way that you kind of think about change that happens to you, a lot of times, yeah, there are possibilities that you can plan for change. You can think about, okay, I want to go on this journey. But a lot of times when change happens to you, the first thing that I will always advise people to think of is, what within this can I control? Because a lot of times there are things that, there are two kind of factors: the extenuating factors and the factors that you can control. There are things within your sphere of influence and there are things that are outside of your influence. So when that happens, the first thing that you first of all do is, okay, this has happened, this change has happened. Let me give an example. I'll be practical here. I've been made redundant from my job. A lot of people have gone through this period and have been made redundant from their job, and it's not something that they actually planned for. So in that situation, the first thing you think about is, okay, this has happened. This change has happened. It's not a change I want. What can I begin to control? What is within my sphere of influence within this that I can then begin to think of ways that I can, navigate this? Like you said earlier, you said the battery, the battery went off. There was nothing you could have done about the battery, but I'm sure what you did, and we're on live, we're live 20 minutes down the line. So there must have been something that happened. What that forces you to do is it forces you to think outside of the box. It forces you to think of things that you probably would not have thought of before. It forces you to be proactive. It forces you to, a lot of times people, when change happens, people are reactive. They just like, oh my God, you go in, there's something called, I'm sure you must have heard about it. A lot of people have heard about it, called the change curve. Kubler-Ross's change curve, where you go from denial to anger, then you go to acceptance. Then when you get to acceptance, you begin to think, okay, what can we then do to move forward? So a lot of times people go through that curve, that change curve, and
Sorry, please
the deny.
describe that
Okay,
again. What's that curve? Say that again.
okay, so it's called a change curve. So when change happens to people as human beings, a lot of times the first thing that we do is we go through a state of denial. It's like, no, it can't be happening. This can't be happening. And then some people go into a place of shock from that denial.
Actually,
They go into
sorry.
shock.
You're very right there, because sometimes you hear some news and the first thing you hear is a lie.
Yes, that's the first thing we do. I said to people, I think I even wrote an article about it. I was like, when COVID started, I went through the typical change curve. I said, no, it's not happening. As in, no, it's not happening. So you go through denial, then you go through shock. The next stage in the change curve is people go into shock and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this actually happened. And what does shock do to you? Shock paralyzes you. Some people then go into another phase of anger. They go into frustration because they're like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. That's the lowest point of the change curve. Then you go to acceptance. At that point, you'd be like, okay, I've exhausted myself in anger now. There's really nothing anger can do about it. Okay, this has happened. And you go to acceptance. And then you begin to come up a bit on that curve a bit. Because when you accept it, and that's what I spoke about earlier, you then begin to think about, okay, what is within my sphere of influence? What is within my sphere of control? How can I begin to deal with this issue that has happened? And then from there, from acceptance, and I think sometimes we find it difficult I think that journey sometimes it varies for different people. Some people get to acceptance quickly. Some people don't get to acceptance quickly. Once you get to acceptance, you then begin to think of, okay, how can we move forward? And, I always like to say that all of us go through change one way or the other, whether we like it or not. We go through change in every area of our lives. You go from being a single person to a married person. That's a change. You go from being a parent of a toddler to being a parent of a adolescent. That's a change. You go from being a parent of an adolescent to being a parent of a teenager to being a parent of an adult. We go through change in every sphere of life. It's just that we don't kind of really think about it in that way. Even something as simple as moving house is a change. But it's how you deal with it. And that's why I said the change kind of falls into two things: the change that you plan, which is often ones that you can kind of deal with, and the change that which is a bit slightly more difficult to deal with.
Wow. Okay, I think that just listening to that now, we can say thank you. We finish we finished the stream for tonight. Oh dear me. Wow. All right. So let's pick those points you raised there, and spend a little bit more time on them. So for someone who said the change was unplanned,
Hmm.
right? Um, for that type of person, how do you really start to build your way out? Right. So let's say let's say the death of a loved one.
Hmm.
Okay. Let's pick something like that. Can you really ever build your way out of that?
So when we think of that kind of change, that is, the loss. That's loss.
Hmm.
That is trauma. That is, as I said, when you go through that change curve, you go into acceptance. You go through that, that shock, that denial, then you go to acceptance. And at that point of acceptance, what you begin to deal with at that point is, and it varies for different people. So I would always say people need to kind of understand their threshold for the loss of a loved one. I'll try to use an example of a personal example here. When I lost my dad, I lived in the UK. And so I come from a Muslim background. And so my dad was buried the day after he died. And, he was ill before he died. And so I knew that he was ill. So it was kind of like a shock for me for them to tell me. I remember they sent like a delegation to my house to come and tell me that my dad had passed. And so for me, I was still in that denial stage because I wasn't there and I wasn't at the burial. I wasn't at the burial. And because he'd been buried the next day, I then there was no point in me going home anyway for that, and then decided that I would go home the year after. I would say for the better part of that 1 year that I didn't go home, I knew from a theoretical perspective that my dad had passed, but nothing had really changed for me because obviously I was in the UK, he was in Nigeria, so I wasn't seeing him anyway. It didn't make a difference that I had seen him anyway. So my mindset had said, okay, yes, daddy's passed or daddy's no longer here, but it didn't really sink in. It was until I went back to Nigeria and I went to his burial place, as into where he was buried, and I saw his
Hmm.
tomb. That's when the acceptance came that, oh my God, okay, this change is really true. Daddy, as in, because normally my dad would come and pick me up from the airport or I would see him. It
Wow.
was at that point that I was like, okay, this change, he didn't come to pick me from the airport. He's not here, and that's where I accepted it. Dealing with that though didn't mean that I would it's there are times when I was like, okay, I can't bring daddy back. I can't
Hmm.
bring this person back. What's the best thing I can do further? I know the kind of person he wanted me to be. How can I then, honor his memory, be the daughter that he wanted me to be? So that's place of acceptance is me then going forward to say, okay, what would daddy want me to do? What kind of life would he have wanted me to live? He was
Hmm.
someone who believed a lot in integrity, so that I would be a person of integrity. And that's that acceptance. From that acceptance is then coming up again to say, okay, and a lot of what I do, a lot of the guiding principles for how I live my life is I know that as in I'm an older person now and I'm an adult, but at the back of my mind is I want to make my father proud. I want to make my father proud. I
Wow.
want to make my father proud. So you need to have a why, a purpose that brings you out of that place of acceptance. Even if it's something, I try not to minimize grief. I try not to minimize people's loss. Even if it's something horrible that has
Hmm.
happened, you can choose to say that there will be a purpose that comes out of it. So you would see
Hmm.
sometimes when people lose, people that are very dear to them, they will go through that change curve that I spoke about, and then they will come to a place of acceptance. And then you begin to think, what good can come out of this? I'm
Wow.
a person of faith, I'm a Christian, and I would always say all things work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So this thing that has happened is not great. I'm not going to say it's good. It's not good. I didn't
Hmm.
want to lose my dad when I lost my dad. but what good can come out of it? And that's what allows you to come out to the other side. Because if you don't get,
Wow.
you need to, but you need, so I would say the journey of acceptance for everybody is long. As I said, 1 year was for 1 year. For some people, it'll be 5 years. For some people, it might be 10 years. But as soon as you get to that place of acceptance, you need to look for a why. You need to look for a purpose that comes out of that thing that would allow you to move forward. And it's the same for every loss.
You highlighted something there that's quite important, and um, it's an interesting thing. Just picking that example of your dad that's passed, because I think about this in the context of, say, um, there was a relationship, but then that day-to-day interaction was not there. But then you
Mm,
know that this thing is affecting my life it's going to affect me for the rest of my life. And sometimes, because people are not as close, the
mm,
change may be happening around them,
mm,
but then they don't realize the impact it's going to have later on down the line. I've
yeah.
got a question for you though. Given the fact that you have your sort of background as a change consultant, and we'll come to business transformation in a second, but
Mm.
from that change perspective, do you think that being in the change field prepares you specially to handle change? Or would you say, look, it doesn't matter how much you've been in this area, when the rubber hits the road, like they say, you're going to have to deal with it like every other person?
Yes, regardless of the fact that you. So I am not. I would say I'm obviously, as because I work in change and transformation. I am not a change averse person. Change. I actively look for ways to improve. But like you said, when the rubber hits the road, even though you are that person who works in that field, as I said, change happens to us in different ways. So I would also kind of go through that curve sometimes as well. I'll give a classic example of how I went through this. Even though I work in change and transformation, when the pandemic hits, and we went through the motions of, okay, we're going to start working from home, we're going to transition to working from home. I really struggled with homeschooling. I really, really struggled with homeschooling. I went through that denial phase as well. I went through that anger and frustration phase. I have an 8-year-old son who, if anybody who has like an 8-year-old son who, yeah, who kind of thinks he knows more than you, and I'm trying to teach him, and he's like, "Mom, that's not how my teacher taught me the maths." I had to work. I was working full time
Oh, so you
at the
have that
same time.
problem too. We went through that
you know,
phase. That's not how my teacher taught me.
That's not how my teacher taught me. We use this method. I went to school in Nigeria, so this is the way we learned multiplication. Is not the same way they learn multiplication. And it's like, no, that's not how my teacher taught me. And it was a change for me. I was really struggling, and I really struggled with it. As in, and I was like, wow, as in, this is me that normally I'm not a change averse person, but I'm really struggling with this transition from me having to homeschool my child myself while working full time. So, yes, regardless of the fact that I work in change and transformation, when change happens to me, or when change happens to someone who works in that sphere, we also, like, human beings, you know what? Human beings naturally, we do not like change. Our natural state is that we do not like change. We do not like to change. We like comfort. We like the familiar. We like things being familiar. We like, that's why it's very difficult for people to move out of their comfort zones, because, this is how you're used to doing something. So you kind of master it. You know how to do it. So you wanting to do something different is going to be uncomfortable. It causes some discomfort, and our fight or flight reaction as human beings means that we fight anything that means that that causes discomfort to us. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, in life, progress often comes from change. You can't. I was thinking about this in my head, and I was like, I think the best analogy is a butterfly. A
Mm.
butterfly has to go into a cocoon and stay in that cocoon in an uncomfortable situation for a period of time before they can become a butterfly. And the ultimate as in, because when I was thinking about it, I was looking at the trajectory of a butterfly. So they're a caterpillar, and then they go into a cocoon, into
Yeah.
something uncomfortable, but they would never be able to fly if they don't go into that cocoon, if they don't go into that discomfort of the cocoon. And it's not even just about the beauty of them flying or how beautiful caterpillar butterflies are. Butterflies play a very important part in the ecosystem. They are, without butterflies, disseminating pollen, we can't have honey. It disrupts, if you don't have butterflies, if you don't have a butterfly within the ecosystem, it distributes our food, it impacts our food production. So, there is a bigger thing than just the butterfly flying and the butterfly, being pretty, looking pretty. And that's the same way for change. You need to go through that discomfort, because that discomfort allows you, prepares you for the value that you need to add, or the value that you need to then bring into the system, into the things around you, into your ecosystem. And so that's why, even though we struggle with it, even though sometimes it's uncomfortable,
Mhm.
we still have to go through that change.
So let me ask you this question. The sort of a theme, if you will, of tonight is making change happen. So now we're not talking about the one of what life does to you.
Yeah.
We're talking about someone who has definite goals, dreams, ideas,
Mm.
things they want to happen, and now they need to make that jump. What are some of the challenges that you have seen that stop people from making that jump? Right now, we want to be deliberate, like they say, intentional. Somebody is saying,
Mm.
okay, so should I leave my job now, or should I you used marriage earlier, probably different. Should I marry that person or not?
Mm.
But yeah, what are some of the challenges that you've seen when it comes to that need to make the change?
So one of the first things that I would always think about, when people want to embark on a change journey, when they want to, move into something different in their lives, is you need to have a vision. And I know vision sounds very airy fairy, even within the business space, you need to have a strategy. This is where we are. As we say, this is our as is, and this is the vision of where we want to go to. So same thing for personal life. If you want to make a change, so as you said, you used marriage. Why do I want to get married? You know, why do I want to change my job? A lot of times it sounds really cliche, but start with the reason why and the vision for why you want to make the change. Once you then have that vision and say, okay, this is what I want to achieve. The reason why I want to change my job is because, say, for instance, I don't think I'm getting fulfillment from this particular job, and then I think when I move into this career space, I'll begin. It suits my personal style more, or and you know what, I always say, let's not even be noble. Sometimes you come in because I want to make more money and that career is what's going to make me make more money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just own the reason why you want to make the change. Once you're clear of the reason why you want to make the change, what you then need to do is, okay, try and find out, and this is something that we do a lot, in like the corporate sense as well. You kind of think about, because what people then do is, oh, I have this vision, and then it becomes a pie in the sky thing of, okay, this is the vision I have, and it's just like, okay, I want this vision. You then say, where am I now? What is my current state?
Mm.
Where am I now? And so when you decide, and you have to be very, let me use the word brutal, but you have to be honest with where you are now. As in, you have to say, if I'm earning £20,000 and I say I want to earn £50,000, I want to earn £100,000. Why do you need to look at, okay, the £20,000 that I'm earning now? Those people that earn £100,000, who are they? What did they do that makes
Mm.
them earn £100,000? So I have to do an honest evaluation of myself now to say, okay, these are the skills that those people have. I don't have XXXX of those skills. And then you put a plan in place.
Let me throw a question to you there, just while you're saying that, because some people may say, I get you. I'll have a vision. I look at all these people out there. But then, they say, why am I defining my journey by what someone else has done? That's the way they got there. Maybe in my case will be different. And sometimes when we bring it into the faith circles, again, it's a
Yeah.
little bit different. And you
Mm.
mentioned that earlier. Where do you draw the line between that big faith project you want to do, or you're embarking on,
Mm.
and well, if every other person is doing it like this, you to make sure that you use them as a benchmark?
So when I say a better person is doing this way, it is, I'm not looking, as in sometimes I'm a person of faith as well. So I totally understand where you're coming from to say you have that faith journey. I'm a Christian, so let me look at the example of Jesus Christ as an example of someone who had a journey. Jesus Christ lived for just 33 years and he had a ministry of just 3 years. But and then if Jesus Christ had looked at the Pharisees, for instance, or the Sadducees, his ministry was totally different from their ministry, and he accomplished what they weren't able to do in just 3 years of being alive. But what I always say to everyone is that regardless of whether you're a person of faith or not, or whatever you want to go through, there is always a process for something. There is always a process. So regardless of if your journey is going to be different from somebody else's journey, it might not be the exact same journey. It might not be the exact, yes, somebody else might have done it in 5 years, but you would do it in 1 year, or you would do it in 6 months. But there is always a process. And I like to believe that there is something about going through the process and going through, and there's something that consistency gives you to be the person that you want to become. So there's a book, I'm always talking about the book everywhere. There's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he says, when you want to make changes in your life, one of the best ways to make changes in your life is to look at the identity of that person that you want to become. And you ascribe the identity. So as I said, it could be somebody else took 10 years to become a CEO. It's not about the journey itself alone. It's not about but it's the process. Who is a CEO? What are the ingredients of a CEO? So you could have taken somebody else became a CEO at 55 and you became a CEO at 25. I'm just using examples here. But essentially, there's a particular skill set or a particular type of person that becomes a CEO. You need to do an honest evaluation of yourself to say, am I that person now? I always like to say that who we are becoming is much more important than what we want to become. So you might not necessarily be at that place yet, but you need to begin to take steps that will make you to take on the identity of that goal or that thing that you want to become. If I want to be financially free, for instance, what are the attributes of people that are financially free? It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to have the exact same journey as those people, but I take on the traits, I take on the process that allows me to be able to make that change to become financially free. And as you said, there's a fake factor. There's a fact that God allows us to give. There is a favor that sometimes can allow you to accelerate faster. But even though I'm a person of faith, I think sometimes we often want to do what God we want God to do we want to do what only God can do, and we want God
Mm.
to do what we can do. We want to
Mm.
do we want to say we want God to we want to do what God what yes, people are getting this. I claim it, but then God is saying you have a part. God works. We're co-laborers, as in we're co-laborers with him, so he will do his part, which is to give us that massive explosion that nobody else can give you, that divine edge that nobody else can give you. But there is a part to play as well. And the example I used earlier as Jesus. Jesus was Jesus. He was Jesus, and he could have decided not to go through the process of learning in the Sanhedrin. As a child, he went to the synagogue. He learned scripture. He didn't need to know scripture because he was
Yeah.
Jesus, but he still learned scripture. so
Okay.
that he could, talk back to the Pharisees when he needed to.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I have a question for you here. And just before I ask that question, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we want to look at how do you manage through the process when
Mm.
you are doing all the right things and the change somehow that you're looking for is not happening. We'll be right back in a few minutes to look at that point. All right, thank you. Welcome back. We've been talking to Oyindamola Sosanya, a change and business transformation consultant. And just before the break, Oyindamola, the question was this: I've been doing all the right things. You know, you talked about the attributes of the people, of the person you want to be, right? I've been doing all the
Yes.
right things, but the change is not happening. Talk to us. What do I do?
So I'm going to go back to another quote from this book. So I think it was one of the profound quotes that I've
Go ahead.
was one of the most profound quotes that I've ever seen. He said, "Every time I'm doing something and I don't see a result, I go and look at the stone cutter who is, trying to break a piece of stone. He's trying to break a big piece of stone. So he keeps hammering on it. He keeps hammering on it. He keeps hammering on the stone, and he could hammer on it for 100 times, 150 times, 130 times, and this hammer, this stone, is not breaking. And then at the 150th throw, the stone breaks open. So anybody that is looking that hasn't seen the previous 100 and something wouldn't have seen the 150 stones that had been cut, that had been, the 150 blows that he had been given to that stone. He only sees that 150th one where the stone breaks open. And that's the power of consistency. And that is the power of, keeping at it. I always say that the difference between every person and the people who actually fulfill their goals is the power to continue going at it. I know it's really difficult sometimes. I know that sometimes I also agree that sometimes there is a place for reevaluation. But what I find that is that there's always something that you learn from continuing to hone your craft. There's always something that you learn from continuing to, keep at that thing, that discipline. I'm trying not to use the word discipline because I know discipline is a word that makes people quaver, but unfortunately, it is what it is. There is that thing from continuing even when it appears like it's not happening, because as Malcolm Gladwell says, there is a tipping point. And what happens is that a lot of people often give up before they get to that tipping point. So
What
the
what
stone cutter.
guides that thing? What guides when you get to that tipping point? I'm just thinking about that 1 to 150 you talked about. Now, Come on, by the time you've done 120, all the naysayers, and we'll get to that in a second. All the naysayers,
Yes.
what's wrong? Look at you. You better get on with this thing. What
So,
does that tipping point?
so the tipping point is all of the pressure that you've been putting before. That's the tipping point. The tipping point is all of that pressure that you've been putting before is what then allows you finally breaks it. So at every point, as you're continuing, you're making an inroad. You're making an inroad. Even if your inroad, it might mean that you have to, life, as you said, life isn't sometimes linear. Sometimes you learn lessons, but every single lesson that you learn means that as you're going on. So there's something we call so I'm lean certified, and lean is a methodology used by it was made popular in Japan by the Toyota they use it in the Toyota manufacturing line. And there's a concept called PDCA, called Plan Do Check Act. It means that you plan for what you want to do. And then, as I said earlier, when you have a change that you plan for, you plan, then you do. As you do, you're carrying out the action of what you're doing. The next thing that you do is you check all of the things. So when I'm saying the stone cutter example I gave earlier, it doesn't just mean that you keep on. The stone cutter is just one example. It doesn't mean that you find out, okay, as I'm hitting the stone, where does it look like is I'm getting much traction? It seems like when I'm hitting this place, it is much better. So you check to say, okay, these things that I'm doing, you have periodic times. And so that's why I always say to people that it's always very important as an organization, as a team, as a person to take regular times to reflect, to review. And that's what the check-in is, to say, okay, I'm applying this pressure. What is working? What isn't working? Why is it not working? Can I do it differently? Can I adapt it? Can I tweak it a bit? So that's what the check-in is for. And then you act. And so you continue, because what happens is that a lot of times people then get, at that check-in, they get you. So, I don't think I can do this anymore. So, but you check, you adapt, you iterate. You say it appears this isn't working. Okay, we said we were going to be doing this. You know what? I think it's a bit better in the mornings. I think maybe the stone is a bit softer in the mornings. Maybe we should apply more pressure in the mornings instead of wasting our time to do it in the evening. So what PDCA does for you is allows you to look at where can you get the most optimal output for the effort that you're putting in. And then you
Wow.
check and then you continue acting. But you don't stop acting. Because that's what people will stop at that plan, do, then they do, they're like, oh my God. I'm doing, but I can't see. But why are you just doing? You check and say, okay, why? Why is it not working? Okay, what I'm doing, it appears that it's not working. Why? Then when you find out why, you go to the, and then again, we can go into that for another couple of minutes. You go into the root cause, you ask the right questions. People don't like asking questions.
Hmm.
People see as in, why isn't it working? What is the reason why this isn't working? Okay, and then you go down into the root cause of it. You don't just treat the symptoms and say, okay, what, we're just breaking it and it wasn't breaking. Why is it not breaking? Is it because maybe the temperature where it is too high? When you find that out, then you act and then
You
you
are
continue to iterate.
okay. So let me ask the question a bit differently. So say uh uh I was talking to, I think it was my wife, about this, or someone a few weeks ago, and the point was this, that you see at that initial stage where you've come out with your dream, you've come out with your idea and all of that, then you get all these naysayers coming in and
Mm.
telling you how you're not doing it right. How do you handle that pressure in the context of, you're hitting your 150 times, or however many times it is in your particular case? How do you handle the naysayers and that pressure at that point in time?
So the naysayers, as I said, are external factors. They're factors that, yes, I'm not even going to lie here to say sometimes it doesn't get to you, but you always need to filter. And another thing I want to say as well is that sometimes maybe naysayers is not the word, because some people might actually be giving you feedback that could be constructive, but you also always need to be able to filter. And that's why I use the word check. What all of those things that the naysayers are saying, sometimes that pressure that is coming from the naysayers, sometimes they could have a point, you know. But what you need to do is you need to have, I don't want to use the word scientific, but here, scientific, not scientific, maybe scientific is not the word, but you need to have an objective. Maybe objective is the word. You need to be able to have an objective take. Sometimes when we have a dream, or we have something that we're really pursuing, sometimes, there's a personal element to it. So when people are naysaying, you could often feel that, okay, it's an attack on me or an attack on my personality. A lot of times you need to be able to take yourself out of the equation sometimes to be able to make a better, more informed decision. I'm trying to think of a practical example here. I'm trying to think of something I can use as an example here. So let me give an example that I can actually relate with. I remember a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to make a change and I wanted to lose weight, because I felt that I wasn't healthy and I felt I needed to get to a better size. And then, I started doing all the things that I needed to do, and I lost the weight. And a lot of people around me really did not like it. And they were like, "Oh my God, you look sick. You look really, really sick. This one is too much." And short, everywhere I went to, people, whenever people see me, the first thing they will say is, "What happened to you? Were you ill? This one is too much. Oh, I'm Nigerian as well." Even my mother was like, hey, this one that you're in London, people will be thinking that something is wrong with you and everything. And you know what? To a certain degree, some of those people were right, because it was quite a drastic, from someone who was really, really big to someone who, I really, really lost a lot of weight. But I then as well took some of, so some of those people, I knew that it wasn't like it was bad, or they were doing it for some people, it was from a space of spite. But for a lot of those people, it was because they loved me and they were, I don't really like the way you look ill. And I took some of that feedback on board and looked at it objectively to say, okay, really, as in, you do look like you've lost a lot of weight. You've lost a lot of weight on your face. You just look as if you look a bit gaunt. Maybe you need to change. I wasn't going to stop doing what I was doing, but I took some of that feedback and at some points I was a bit defensive. But what allowed me to be able to make some progress was for me to take that defensiveness away from it. And I know that weight is a very personal thing, but I'm just using that as an example. I needed to take that objectivity to say, okay, yeah, you do. There are times that you do look a bit like, you look really, really, drawn. And I took some of that feedback in a constructive way, the constructive elements of it, but still decided that this is this is what I want to do, and I'm not going to, I'm not going back to where I was coming from. I'm not going to be that person anymore. I want to be healthy. I want to be fitter. But I still took that feedback on board. So I think the best way to be able to take those naysayers and all of those people that are going to say the things that are going to say, because people are going to say things that are going to say, especially when you're doing something that is different,
Mm,
something that has never been done before.
mm.
What you need to do is to be able to filter that feedback. I like to call it feedback, not criticism, because criticism sometimes, makes it feel we take it personally. But you take some of that feedback and say, okay, this one is valid, but this one is not valid. And you're the one who knows your vision.
Hmm.
The Bible tells us that write the vision, make it plain. What you're seeing is not everybody that's seeing it. What you think you're going is not everyone that sees it with you. So they can have an opinion, but you need to be able to filter what opinion is constructive and what isn't. What allows a lot of people not to move forward is that they don't learn how to filter that feedback or, or, or,
Appropriately.
or
Wow.
appropriately.
Wow. All right. Let me move this conversation a little bit in our last sort of 15 minutes here to the business transformation side of things. And this is where, again, just like the individual, now a lot of people are starting businesses, a lot of people are starting
Mm,
initiatives and all of that during this period. But one of the challenges that some of the scholars have talked about is just the sheer scale of the number of businesses that fail in their first 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Talk us through a typical if there's anything like that, a typical business transformation conversation that someone needs to go through this in their business. And it's not just them now, it's their business
Mm,
that they need to go through.
mm.
Talk us through that.
Okay, so I think the first thing that you need to decide when you want to go through a business transformation journey is, as I said, it sounds very what is the vision of your organization? You know, what are the values? What is this transformation? You know, I'm going to use an example of is what's the name of this company? Is it Kodak? Was it Kodak? Yeah. So there are a lot of extenuating factors. You know, as COVID is such a this last couple of months is such a big example of how organizations have had to adapt. You know, they said that organizations that do not adapt and transform, a lot of them are going to die. So if you take an example of a company like Kodak, for instance, who used to make film, photography film,
Yeah.
and you know, over the years, the world has evolved into a more
Mm-hmm.
digital. We're having this discussion in a digital space,
Yeah.
and so your business model, you have to, you know, you have to always be agile. And I'm not using the word because people like to use the word agile in a very, you know, technical way. What I mean by agility is the ability to be able to read the environment, read the business environment, read those things around you, the external factors. You know, a lot of us, we can't operate business in a vacuum. You operate business within the environment around you. So, as an organization or as a business person, you need to be agile enough to be able to see what of the things, what the world is saying. I think when we were having a chat earlier, there is this assumption that, you know, oh, we're going to get back to normal, or things are going to, you know, we're going to go back to normal. What is normal? You
Yeah.
know, we've gone through as a society, as human beings, people are saying this is our fourth industrial revolution. We've come from being agrarian, you know, being agriculture, an agricultural way of living. We've moved to the second industrial revolution. We've gone to the third industrial revolution, and we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution where tech, and not that I'm saying that tech is good, going, you know, we're going to all be robots or everything, but it's either you evolve, unfortunately, or you become extinct. So, as a
Mm.
business owner or as someone who is in business or as business generally, you have to continuously look at what the external factors are saying and how you can then begin to have your value proposition of what your what services or what products or whatever you are offering to your client base, and how you can, you know, use your, as in your business model and how you do things to be able to create the best value for your customer. You know, your customer essentially, or the people that you serve essentially, are the people who kind of drive what you need to do. Just imagine if, I know people have issues with the fact that, you know, we now do most things online, but imagine if we hadn't kind of had some of those businesses being in that way. I don't know how I would have actually coped without online deliveries. As I said, I was in the last couple of days, I've had a couple of people do so many things. And, you know, I've sent out stuff by Amazon from my house. I've sent out, there was no way I could go to their houses, but Amazon had allowed me to be able to send things to people's houses. So, as a business owner or as someone who's in business or someone who is leading a business, you need to be able to understand that, you know, you have to be agile enough to look at what is happening in your environment to be able to, you know, take your business on that journey that allows you to be able to perform effectively to deliver the best value for your customers
I want
or your
to
service
ask
or whoever it is your.
I want to ask something here. Some of the points around what you need to do as an individual are not too different in terms of what you would do as an organization.
Yeah.
How do you adapt appropriately in the context of an organization where maybe they seem to be going in one direction and you feel, but
Mm,
hang on, hey, I've been reading all these books are telling me we're doing something different. In other
mm,
words, you are changing faster than the organization. How do you
Mm.
manage that sort of situation?
So, I need to understand that question a bit. So, as a change leader,
As
or
an
as
individual,
an individual within an
you are in an organ. Yes,
organization,
yes, yes.
you need to be able to. I think what a lot of people, you need to be able to speak the language that a lot of people understand. So, one thing that I have to do a lot in my job is to paint a story, is to be able
Hmm.
to tell and take people on a journey of what do we hope to achieve, or what are we going to lose if we do not go on this change. You can't just say it, oh, I've got a gut feel. You need to be able to back it with facts. So you need to be able to have, it might mean that you might need to do some sort of research, to do a kind of business case, to be able to say, okay, this is what the market is saying, this is what we are doing. And if we don't do this, this is what is potentially what we're going to be able to lose. Everyone responds to what's in it for me. Everyone responds to value. Everyone responds to, okay, this is what we're going to get from this. So if you work in an organization and it appears that people are not, kind of clued on to the things that are happening out there, and you can see what is happening, what you need to do is you need to be able to paint a case, paint a picture, tell a story of why the change is necessary. um, a lot of people who work in who have that kind of mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, a lot of what they have to do is a lot of storytelling, a lot of convincing, a lot of being able to use. And I think you have to appeal to both emotions, and you also
Hmm.
have to be able to appeal to the fact. Show people always say, what is the value for money? Show people the value for money. Show the benefits.
Yeah.
What are the benefits that we're going to get? What are the quantitative benefits we're going to get from embarking on this change? What are the qualitative benefits? Sometimes you're not able to um, demonstrate or exhibit it in plain monetary terms, but you can talk about things like the the goodwill, for instance, that you could get, or the reputational damage or something. There
Hmm.
is always a benefit to a change that you want to implement within an organization, and sometimes it's quantitative. It's money. You can make money from it, or you
Hmm.
can save money from it, or there's even sometimes where you can even show that you can avoid costs. If you're able to show a business, your board, that you're going to be able to say, I'm going to be able to avoid us spending £1 million or £500,000 in the next 3-4 years. So, oh, that means we're going to save money. So it's either you look for how you can show cost savings, how you can show cost avoidance, how you can show how you can make money, or you
Hmm.
show the more qualitative elements of it to say, okay, this would be good for our brand, this would be good for our reputation, this is going to earn us brownie points with the government, for instance. There are various ways you can sell, but you need to take people on that journey. You need to show. Again, I go back to vision. I'm always talking about vision, but you need to be able to show people where we are going, paint that story, and most times people would buy into it.
Let me ask you this in our final sort of for 5 minutes. In the course of this conversation, you've talked about two, three, or four books there.
Yeah.
How important is this conversation around reading the kind of books that you have mentioned in preparing one for change?
So I always say that the more you read, the more you know. And so I know sometimes when people talk about reading, it can seem intimidating sometimes, but I think it's really important to be able to have a learning growth mindset, especially in the world that we live today. So reading or trying to gain knowledge means that you're kind of abreast of all of the things that are happening, and it gives you new ideas. It gives you the ability to see a point of view that you might not have considered before. So when you read a book, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's everything or all of the principles within that book that you would actually subscribe to. But what you do when you read is that you are seeing something from a point of view that you probably had never seen before. And that, sparks your creativity sometimes. That also sparks your imagination sometimes. And it allows you to see things in a totally different way. I always recommend that, read books as well, listen to read articles, listen to, watch shows like the shows we are on now, be someone who has a growth mindset. And when you have a growth mindset means you have a learning mindset. You have the ability to understand that I don't know it all. I probably wouldn't have all of the ideas that I need to have. So can I learn from others? Can I get concepts or ideas I might not have thought of? So it's really, really important that you're open to learning from others. And that's the reason why books, because you're learning from others when you read a book. You're learning from someone else's perspective. You're learning from what someone else has taken the time to research and put down into a book. So yeah, it's a very, very important mindset to have. Either
All
it's
right.
books, either it's articles, or listening to shows like this or podcasts or whatever it is that you prefer.
Fantastic. So, as we round up, what is new in the life of Oyindamola Sosanya? What is new? What's happening?
Oh my god, as what's new? I'm trying to think of what is new. That's a very hard question. That's harder than all of the questions I've answered so far. This is the hardest one. Um, wow, I'm trying to think of what is new. I just think nothing has actually really changed in the last 12 months. I've just been in this house for the past 12 months. Okay, I lie. There are things that have changed. So recently, in the last couple of months, I launched a book club.
Hey.
Um, I launched a book club. And so, we've had a couple of sessions so far, and I am really proud of all of the things that the people within that community, that reading community, all of the things that we're talking about. We're talking about topical issues where people are coming and saying, you know what, I haven't read books in, I haven't been able to, following on from my last question, I haven't read a book in 15 years, and
Wow.
I've started reading again. So for me, I think that's one of the things I'm really, really excited about. I'm excited to see how that community will grow and all of the things that the people are going to take from the books that they're reading and apply to their lives. So that's one thing that I think is new. Yeah, I think there are a couple of other things, but I'm not really thinking they're new. I've taken on new projects at work, but I just feel that I've just been in the same place for the last couple of
No,
months, the last
it's
9 months.
amazing that sometimes, like what you've just talked about there, there's a lot of change happening around us, and sometimes we don't notice it as quickly as we should. That these things are
Yes.
really happening here, and sometimes it takes just thinking about it again, and suddenly you realize, oh my god, the book club, oh my god, this project at work, oh my god, that one, and then you put
As in,
everything together, it looks
yeah,
massive.
yeah. When you said it, I was like, wow. I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot going on. As in, there's a lot of transition going on at work as well. There's a lot,
Yeah,
but yeah. But as you said, because I'm just in the thick of it. I haven't thought about it as new things
new
for me
stuff.
as well. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been an amazing time for me. Just learning new things. I'm going to go back, watch this now, plan how I handle all that change there. Oh, absolutely. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much. Thank you.
Really appreciate this time. And to our viewers, thank you. We'll be back again on Thursday night for another interesting episode of the program. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you once again, Oyindamola. All the best in your book club. And I hope that grows really well in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.